Okay, welcome to the deep dive. It's just the two of us here today, ready to plunge into a truly wild collection of source material you shared.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting. We're talking about excerpts from an anthology, right? The Living Dead.
Yeah, that's the one, edited by John Joseph Adams. And let's be clear up front. These aren't, news reports or scientific papers.
No, definitely fiction.
Right. But our mission for this deep dive is to treat the content within these stories, the experiences, descriptions, the ideas they present about, well, a world where the dead walk
We're
these...
treating that as the facts we're exploring.
Exactly, like gathering eyewitness accounts from, well, an impossible reality.
Right, thinking of these narratives as different perspectives, different observations on a shared, horrifying phenomenon.
So what stands out when you kind of pull back and look across all these different accounts? What patterns or maybe contradictions pop up?
Well, that's the goal, isn't it? We've got snippets here covering everything from, gritty street-level survival to these really bizarre personal encounters, even glimpses into how society, politics, culture might, like, try to handle it, or just completely fall apart.
Yeah, so our goal is to sort of distill the most striking details, the surprising bits, and try to make some sense of this really complex picture the sources paint.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this stack and see what we can learn about, well, the living dead.
Right. Let's dive in by trying to get a handle on what these living dead are actually like, according to this source material.
Okay. Well, there's a definition that feels pretty foundational, pulled from a typescript in one account. Describes them simply as bodies without souls, the living dead. Once they were dead, and after that they were called back to life again. It attributes that to Hurston Tell My Horse.
That's a key starting point, isn't it? It immediately frames it not just biologically, but as an absence, a body moving, but without a soul or consciousness.
Yeah, the essential self is gone. And the sources are just relentless, really, in describing the physical reality.
Oh, yeah.
We see the classic image, the shamble, the shuffle, slow movement. But what really hits you are the sensory details, especially the smell.
Right, I saw those descriptions, like awful smell, stinking of the grave.
Yeah, and even one that smelled like a woodchuck exploded with gassy decay.
Oof. Okay. Pretty visceral stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the visual decay is just constant. Pus-filled eye sockets, a shattered face, peeling head, exposed bone.
And they seem kind of clumsy, like the one struggling with stairs.
Yeah, that physical awkwardness comes up, the dead, awkward weight someone tried to drag. Poor eyesight, or maybe none at all.
Yeah.
But then there's this weird thing.
What's that?
Multiple accounts note they seem to prefer the light, or drawn to it. Dawn sets them going, a bright day means you're likely to see them.
Huh. Yeah, that counters the usual trope, doesn't it? Not just creatures of the night.
Exactly. But what's really fascinating, though, is how quickly these sources complicate any single, simple definition. They explicitly show us different kinds of the living dead.
Okay, how so?
Well, some are definitely faster.
Yeah.
Able to run, sort of, in their own way.
Yeah.
Or move quick and heavy, snapping branches. Some are even called predator zombies.
So it's not just one speed setting. It feels like the sources are maybe presenting different categories or different results of whatever causes this.
Right. And you see physical variations beyond just decay, like one described dragging itself on two partially eaten legs, or just a torso and head with a ripped-off arm.
Grim.
But the biggest complication to the whole mindless idea comes from accounts where they groan or bleat, make other sounds, or even show really surprising traits.
Okay, this is where it gets really unsettling, I think.
Yeah, like Tommy the zombie, described as being able to draw and perceived as sad.
Sad. Drawing. That's not mindless decay. That hints at something left over, doesn't it? Like personality or emotion.
Exactly. Or Rusty. This guy apparently has these monthly 24-hour revivals.
Revival.
Yeah, where he gets fixated on things, like a paperweight he apparently croons to like a baby. And he even speaks, confesses past wrongdoings at some kind of rally.
Whoa. Okay, that just blows the simple zombie idea wide open. Reanimation with echoes of obsession, history, maybe even some twisted morality coming through.
It seems like it. And then you get hints of regional differences, maybe. Like Cara North, the suntan zombie, former Miss December on an island, who didn't act like the TV versions.
Right. It makes you wonder about the cause in these different stories. Is it a virus, magic, environmental? The sources don't give one answer, but they show different outcomes.
And some examples push the boundaries even further. This creature, Gimet, tied to bees, bees buzzing around him and from inside him.
Bees. Okay, that's folk horror territory. Less zombie, more like some ancient revenant following people dragging down horses. Wild.
Totally. And then there's the account of the dead kid who can be manipulated and made to do tricks and whimpers.
Oh, that's horrifying. That paints them not just as threats, but maybe as victims too, or tools in a really messed up world.
Deeply messed up. And then that musician zombie with possible mechanical parts. Who plays this complex music, apparently with real skill and feeling, but through another person?
And then asks to be turned off, like have his mechanisms broken.
Yeah. It's this moment that just forces you to think about consciousness, art, and maybe finding some kind of weird grace, or at least release, even in decay.
So these sources definitely make you question what undead even means. It sounds like a whole spectrum.
Absolutely no simple definition, just a lot of observations suggesting many states and behaviors under that one label.
Okay. So if that's what the living dead can be like, what do these sources tell us about actually living in a world where they walk? Survival strategies.
Well, survival looks incredibly varied. You definitely see the classic defense stuff, building fences, alarms, motion lights, sensitive enough for a cat, one notes.
Huh. Practical.
Yeah. Chainsaws, fire, homemade napalm gets a mention because it sticks.
Makes sense. Brutal, but logical. Weapons, too.
Oh, yeah. Practical stuff like Walthers, Uzis, .38s.
Mm-hmm.
More hands-on tools like machetes, baseball bats, and even like ritual items, ointment, and a machete in that raising ceremony account.
So that's the active approach. Fortify, fight back.
Right, the intuitive response. But then these sources present this very different, much darker philosophy of survival.
Oh.
Yeah, we hear about people hiding, not just, in shelters, but trying to blend in, crouching to the center of a drove, allowing the dead to sweep them along.
How would that even work?
They're discerned by their color and sentience, apparently. But there's also this explicit chilling advice in one source. It's stupid to resist.
Why?
Because only the living resist, and the dead don't have will.
Wow. Okay, so that suggests survival comes from becoming passive, from dully accepting everything that happens to you.
Pretty much. The character Ben, who died because he was a leader and a fighter, is used as the grim example.
That raises a really disturbing question, then. Does holding on to your will, your sentience, actually make you more vulnerable in this kind of reality? Do you survive by becoming, well, more like the dead?
It's a bleak thought, isn't it?
Or,
Regardless of this strategy, the psychological toll described is just immense.
I can imagine.
Accounts detail profound isolation, loneliness. Like Lucy, who feels half dead in a different way,
Yeah.
wondering if she has this strange symbiotic curse with the zombies around her,
Yeah.
and the sheer weight of despair, fear, panic, grief. It comes through so vividly. Remembering a dead husband's remains, the horrific death of a mother and baby described with just raw pain.
And people just get used to it.
Seems like it. Becoming inured to those screams, eventually sleeping through them as the number of survivors just dwindles. That numbness, while maybe necessary, says so much about the trauma.
And you see these kind of bizarre coping mechanisms too, right?
Oh yeah, a whole range. Some characters develop this strange detachment, others find a morbid fascination. That narrator at the library who cleans and carries her corpse.
That image is incredibly potent and unsettling, like coping through some bizarre ritual.
Right, and the desire for normalcy just constantly clashes with the horror. Scrubbing vegetables while thinking about the past, trying to have business dinners, or even romantic relationships.
It really highlights how stubborn human needs are, doesn't it? Even when the world's completely broken, people still crave connection, routine, purpose, however twisted the context gets.
Absolutely. We even see moments of strange peace described, or belonging, like Traeger in that mining colony finding friendship despite his own, complex personal drama.
And the absurdity of it all. Planning a party in a house whose owners are off building bicycles in France.
Yeah. Or thinking about missed romantic chances while the world ends. Or that writer just stubbornly typing away in the apocalypse with literally no market for his stories.
It suggests that life, in all its messy, illogical ways, just finds cracks to keep going, even if the reality around it is shattered.
Yeah. The line between the living and the dead, or life and some other kind of non-existence, feels constantly blurred in these accounts. Surviving seems to demand this adaptation that might feel, well, disturbingly close to the state of the undead themselves.
Okay, stepping back a bit.
Yeah.
These sources also show how this impacts bigger things, right? Society, politics, belief systems.
Definitely. Politically, you see a campaign struggling with how to even talk about the fact that the dead are walking.
How do they handle it?
Well, Some treat it as something to ignore or dodge or spin politically, trying desperately to apply the old rules.
Yeah, that sounds familiar even without zombies.
Right. But others in the sources recognize that the old rules don't apply, and they criticize the spinning as pandering and it's cowardice. You see that friction clearly.
And then there's that absolutely bizarre scene using zombies in a rally.
Oh, yeah. Brought out to speak to us, to tell us what they would have us do,
Hmm.
leading to this public spectacle with confessions and retching crowds.
Wow. That's a wild picture of extreme political exploitation, using the bodies as grotesque props.
It really is. And beyond formal politics, you see cultural beliefs and folklore intersecting powerfully with this reality.
Like the Zora Neale Hurston related one.
Exactly. It directly uses Haitian Vodou concepts, words of passage, figures like Urzeli, the Sect Rouge, even the historical figure Felicia Felix Mentor. It treats these as real forces or explanations within that story's world.
So it offers a completely different framework than just, say, a biological one. It puts reanimation into a spiritual or folkloric system.
Right, where the dead aren't just shambling corpses, but maybe manipulated entities, part of some complex, maybe supernatural order, and contrast belief in that system with personal free will.
Interesting. And there was another folklore connection.
Yeah, the one set in a Western place introduces the local legend of Gemet, the bee guy we mentioned, blending folk horror with the zombie theme. It
Hmm.
shows how existing local lore might get, reinterpreted or find new relevance.
And religious institutions, how do they cope?
They face similar challenges. That Oberammergau Passion Play scene is incredibly striking.
What happens there?
They actually incorporate a zombie into the performance, which predictably sparks debates about sacrilege, the clash between tradition and this new, horrifying reality.
Wow. How does it end?
The priests react to the wandering corpse on the cross. They end up blessing it before it meets this fiery, lightning-struck end. It really captures that struggle to reconcile faith with this new form of death.
Can existing theology even handle it? Or does it demand a radical rethink?
That's the question it raises. Even academia pops up characters who are anthropologists or researchers, suggesting attempts to understand it scientifically.
But the reality in the story seems way stranger than academic theories could easily explain.
Seems like it. And that detail about TV channels still broadcasting old shows or commercials for a world that's gone.
Yeah, like a ghost of the old world playing on repeat. Super eerie backdrop.
Totally. And beyond those big themes, the sources are just full of these unique, specific encounters, sometimes deeply unsettling ones that offer really potent insights.
Like the ritual for raising a zombie. Arthur Fisk.
Yeah, described in detail. Specific ingredients, graveyard mold, spider webs, and it emphasizes the razor's control over the reanimated person, who starts with no real will of its own.
So that shifts it, doesn't it, from just a natural disaster to something that can be deliberately created and controlled, at least at first.
Exactly. And the library setting keeps popping up. It becomes this microcosm, a classic zombie attack seen by a writer,
Uh-huh.
the character who treats a zombie with that strange, gentle care, and then a grim scene of escape and sacrifice, where someone gets pushed out as a distraction.
So a place of quiet study becomes a stage for terror, bizarre compassion, and brutal pragmatism all at once.
Pretty much. And the really bizarre, horrifying personal stories are just unforgettable.
Like the trophy wife.
Yeah. Reanimated, still worried about losing her looks despite a huge gash on her forehead, obsessed with her Mercedes and jewelry. It's such a darkly satirical take on vanity persisting beyond the grave.
Grimly funny in a way.
And then there are the clinical chilling accounts, capturing and dissecting someone hiding among the dead, like piercing them with instruments until they roar.
Jeez.
Or the graphic descriptions of feeding, like that scene in Calcutta. The sources really don't flinch from the visceral horror. The reanimated are monsters, but also disturbingly biological specimens or consumers in this horrific new ecosystem.
And there was the meat house narrative.
Yeah, exploring sex with corpses. Horrific, but those moments push the boundaries of how interactions with the living dead are shown in these sources, raising profoundly uncomfortable questions about human nature and depravity when everything breaks down.
It's heavy stuff. But then, contrasted with something like the musician zombie again.
Right. That one is just so poignant. Capable of creating beauty through someone else and then apparently asking for release, to be turned off.
It's like even in that state, something persists. Art, maybe. Or just a desperate plea for peace, a flicker of grace in the darkness.
Yeah, it really feels like that. These sources, in their fragmented way, they really do paint this incredibly varied, often contradictory picture A world grappling with the dead returning.
They pull on so many threads: the biology, the social collapse, the personal fears and desires, beliefs,
No.
even art.
They give us multiple, sometimes conflicting views on this impossible scenario. They use the living dead as this powerful catalyst to explore human nature under pressure, societal breakdown, the limits of our understanding of life and death itself.
It definitely leaves you with a lot to chew on, doesn't it?
For sure.
We've seen survival defined as fighting, hiding, or unsettlingly just dissolving your will. We've seen human connection or its absence thrown into sharp relief, and how the old world structures and obsessions can persist in these strange, distorted ways.
Yeah, this deep dive through the sources really shows a world where the living dead aren't just one simple thing. They're complex. The phenomenon shifts depending on the lens: folklore, politics, personal trauma, even art.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the dead were to truly walk, what parts of our own lives, our own society, would suddenly look half dead already? Or just going through the motions?
Hmm. And what strained, brutal, or maybe even beautiful necessities would arise in response? It's a provocative thought.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some fresh perspective and plenty to think about.